The Please Call Me movement is continuing its protest outside Vodaworld in Midrand, Johannesburg, in support for Please Call Me inventor Nkosana Makate. The telecommunications giant has been embroiled in a protracted legal battle with Makate, who was a Vodacom employee when he thought of the idea. The movement earlier gave the company until 10 a.m. today to resolve the stalemate with Makate, which has now lapsed. The South African Police Service has blocked protesters from entering Vodaworld. Please Call Me movement convener Modise Sitwaba says the reported 70 billion rand that is owed to Makate is a fair amount. Well, for more on this story, we cross to our reporter Mbalenhle Mthetwa, who's standing by for us. Mbali, so what is the latest there, and are the SAPs still protecting the Vodaworld area?
Good afternoon, Nompu. Yes, indeed. The police are still standing in front of the main gate at Vodaworld. They are protecting protesters from actually trying to break down the window. Not the window, but the gate, from breaking down the gate in order to get into the premises. They had tried earlier to get into the premises, and they were demanding to get into the premises, saying that they needed to get in so that they can occupy the building until Vodacom pays Makate what is due to him. Now, I had a couple of conversations with them, and they are adamant that he is the inventor of the Please Call Me innovation. There are conversations about that, alleging that he is not the inventor, saying that a contractor that was contracted to MTN is the original originator of the Please Call Me innovation. And we don't know how those conversations have have influenced negotiations between Vodacom and Makate. But at this stage, I am joined by the head of legal at Vodacom, who's going to be talking to us about the interactions with Makate, as well as the protest that is happening outside. His name is Nkateko Nyoka. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to your program.
Yeah, no problem. At this stage, I'd like to ask, how have your talks and negotiations been between Vodacom and Makate in order to reach some form of reasonable settlement?
So, following the decision by the Constitutional Court, there has been negotiations between Vodacom and Mr. Makate. In those negotiations, after giving access to certain information to Mr. Makate came up with a number that he believed was reasonable and fair in the circumstances. Vodacom also presented its number, and those negotiations effectively collapsed because the parties were far apart in terms of the numbers that were in the table. So the next step was essentially for the Vodacom Group CEO to use the authority of power that was given to him by the Constitutional Court to break the deadlock. After receiving oral and written representations from both parties, the CEO set a number that he believed was fair and reasonable. Suffice to say that that number was significantly higher than the number that Vodacom had offered to Mr. Makate. Now, from our perspective, the determination of the CEO as a deadlock breaking mechanism is final and legally binding on both parties. However, I need to indicate that a couple of days ago, Mr. Makate indicated that through his attorneys, Vodacom was gonna receive correspondence communicating the decision of Mr. Makate to take the determination of the Vodacom Group CEO on judicial review. And we have indeed received such correspondence.
So does that mean Vodacom will be going back to court? And to what extent has this new invention, this new information about the inventor and the innovator influenced conversations?
So effectively, Mr. Makate would be taking the matter on judicial review. Vodacom would have to participate in that process to state its side of the case. And that assumes that the courts would be willing to hear Mr. Makate's case, notwithstanding the fact that the Vodacom Group CEO was designated by the Constitutional Court as a deadlock breaker. On the information from Mr. Arikan and MTN having patented a similar concept as the Vodacom Please Call Me service, that's not new information. The issue has always been in the background. In 2002, 2003, Vodacom did receive a letter of demand from MTN on the basis that the Please Call Me concept had all the attributes of a product that they already had in the market, which was similar. I think at the time it was called Call Me. The second element is that even when we were on trial with Makate, the issue was always in the background. It never really made it into the headlines simply because what the Johannesburg High Court was asked to determine was whether there was a legally binding contract between Mr. Makate and Vodacom, so far as the idea that eventually led to the birth of the Please Call Me service was concerned. That idea having emanated from Mr. Makate at the beginning. So the issue was for the court to determine on the merits whether there was a contract or not. The Johannesburg High Court found eventually that there wasn't a legally binding contract, and I think Mr. Makate applied for leave to appeal in both the Johannesburg High Court and the Supreme Court of Appeal. Both those courts decided not to hear Mr. Makate's case on the basis that he didn't have any reasonable prospects of success. It's history now that the Constitutional Court found in favor of Mr. Makate, hence the negotiations and hence the recent determination by the CEO on the quantum of compensation that ought to be payable to Mr. Makate. And I need to make this point that Vodacom is willing and ready to pay the amount of compensation that the CEO has determined to be fair and reasonable, ready to pay it like yesterday.
Okay, just shortly and very briefly, because we're out of time, is Vodacom not worried about the backlash it received after it served Education MEC Banyaza Lusufi with a gag order, if we can say that, cease and desist order, as well as is Vodacom not worried about people cancelling their contracts with Vodacom and the revenue, the potential to lose revenue through that?
So Vodacom is a strong brand, but obviously we always concerned about our brand equity, the reputation of the company, And indeed, the noise that is surrounding this, please call me dispute, is of concern to us. Hence, it's in our interest to make the payment to Mr. Makate as soon as is practically possible. But at the same time, our approach is informed by what the Constitutional Court has determined. And if we're going to be sidetracked by the noise on the sideline, in effect, we would be in association with the people who are making all the noise, undermine the rule of law. And South Africa, as a government of laws, we must always uphold the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. There you have it. That was the head of legal at Vodacom. But for now, it's back to you in studio.